Hello, my name is Chris Hague for yoummday, and along with Mark Hillary, CX author and consultant, and Lian Rowlands, who's the founder and director of Tayma Solutions, a very experienced CX consultancy business based in the UK. We're going to be discussing yoummday's latest report. It's their CX report for 2025, titled Transforming Customer Experience, the AI Advantage Meets the Human Touch. The four themes discussed in yoummday's CX report for 2025 are the rise of generative AI, human touch in the digital era, a shift to output-based pricing, and the fall of the BPO industry as we know it. We can probably add that suffix there. Mark, I'd like to turn to you first as we talk about this first theme that yoummday introduces. It's the rise of generative AI. I think in the past 12 to 18 months, there's obviously been massive hype, and now we're seeing more and more CX brands deploy AI in various forms within their customer journeys. Looking ahead to 2025, do you think that a lot of CX brands are massively underestimating the impact that AI is going to have on this industry?
I think that, yeah, for sure. There has been a lot of experimentation over the past 2 years in this area. But I think that what we're really seeing now is that people are starting to understand how to train the models much more effectively. You can focus on a much smaller data set. You don't need to train generative AI models on the entire history of Lisbon, for example, when you're going to be answering questions about vacuum cleaners. So I think that when we initially started out on this journey, everyone was focusing their attention on tools like ChatGPT. And now we're starting to see a lot more specialization, and that also helps with the hallucination problem that we saw, because if you are focused on teaching your bot about vacuum cleaners, then it's much easier to avoid the problem of wrong answers and hallucinations, because you're only training it on what it needs to know.
So, Mark, the prediction then becomes that as we head into 2025, we're going to see companies get far more granular with their AI deployment and really niche down, I guess, to save resources, but to improve performance as well.
I think that, broadly, what we're saying is that the customer experience is becoming a technology question rather than the core has always been the contact center. It's always been the agents, and that's how we've always kind of seen this service priced. It's full-time equivalent. You're paying for each agent in the contact center, and we're starting to see a shift very much towards technology being able to handle a lot of the engagement. And it's not going to be able to do 100% for a long time. But there's definitely a change here in that a lot of the volume will be automated and will then need to transfer seamlessly to a human as it's required. But essentially what I'm saying in a sort of long-winded way is that we're talking about CX solutions rather than just contact centers being at the core of it. So whether you're selling the software, the people, the processes, anyone in this business now needs to be able to offer a complete solution.
Lian Rowlands at Tayma Solutions, your CX consultancy. I know you look at the human element, AI and data when you put together CX solutions for your clients. Where do you think generative AI will sit moving into 2025, and how ubiquitous do you think it's going to be?
So I very much agree with Mark, actually, as you'd expect. I don't think it is going to be a freight train, but I think the reasons around that are difficult, are going to be different, and they're going to be quite complex. So, for example, we talk a lot about what AI can do, and I definitely agree with what Mark said about small language models. and being able to train your AI, being able to train generative AI and small language models to focus on the actual challenges you're trying to solve for your customers. So you're not trying to boil the ocean, right? You're trying to actually solve the problems you can solve. And I think what people are waking up to more and more increasingly, what we're seeing is people waking up to the importance of data integration, because we talk a lot about AI managing the simple tasks and freeing up human beings to do the more complex queries and the more emotive queries, and where people really need to talk to other people. But actually that only holds true if the data's there in the first place. So the AI can only solve a simple query if it has the integrated information to be able to say, yes, I know where your parcel is, yes, I know why your slippers haven't arrived, yes, I know when when your delivery driver is going to be there. And that feels like a simple query, but that can be an incredibly complex query if you haven't got the data and the dots connected in the right way. Whereas actually sometimes we see complex queries, what we think might be complex queries. Let's say a relative has passed away, and in the UK we pay the TV license. So how do I cancel a TV license for a deceased relative? Actually, that's a really simple query that doesn't need a human interaction, because I'm just trying to solve a problem. So I think what we're going to see is much more focus in this next coming year in terms of the problems we're trying to solve and the data we need to give the models to solve them effectively. Because if the AI can't solve the problem, the AI should be able to give the agent more information so they can effectively solve the problem. So it's all about this first contact resolution, this fixing things first time, this getting to the problem faster, quicker, and more effectively. And I think that's where we're going to see huge growth in AI and technology next year.
So this really becomes a data question. If companies aren't harnessing their data in a meaningful way now, they're not ever going to give their AI the best chance of success when it's deployed into those customer journeys. And the result, I guess, is going to be missed opportunities to personalize experiences, missed opportunities to optimize operations, and ultimately to drive growth and loyalty in what is an increasingly competitive, not customer market, but also BPO market.
I think they have to. We wouldn't put an agent at a desk without giving them the information to answer the queries from the calls we're directing them. So why would we put a chatbot in that environment? So it's all about the information. And I think if you can't throw AI and you can't throw a large language model or a generative conversational engine, you can't throw that over broken processes and broken data streams, because you'll just get gobbledygook and you'll end up having to hand the customer off to an agent anyway with no value. So if we really want to add value into the experience chain, we have to get the data right at the back end in order to be able to build those journeys more effectively.
100%. That makes a lot of sense. Mark, if we refer to page 8 of YoummDay's report, they have established a framework for AI-based automation that evaluates the value of the customer interactions alongside the emotional involvement perceived by the customer. And so the framework suggests that for low-value interactions with low emotional involvement, high levels of automation are more appropriate. On the other hand, for high-value interactions that involve significant emotional involvement, companies should really be prioritizing deploying high-quality human interactions. Now, looking ahead to 2025, do you think that with the advancements in generative AI that we're seeing, these lines could quickly become blurred? Could generative AI actually start to mimic human emotion well enough to challenge this thinking, perhaps?
The report actually has a case study from Telefonica, and I think that case study gives really good it brings this question to life, because in that case study, they're talking about how they're looking at all of the tasks that they need to perform to deliver a customer experience, and they have used AI and they have automated many of those tasks. But what they're trying to do is keep a lot of the human conversations going. So having the agent being able to chat and talk to the customer in much more detail than they would normally do. So instead of that conversation just being, let's fix this problem, it's more like, how are you using your device? Is there anything that we can help you with? So sort of using that human contact to be able to get to know the customer better. And of course, that naturally leads to cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So you're talking about that human connection leading to revenue growth, even though you've automated a lot of the more basic tasks. So I think that's a great example of that kind of grid working.
So, Mark, this is a very interesting point you bring up, talking about humans and the interactions with them leading to cross-sell and upsell opportunities, because we actually discussed this on one of the panels at Unite CX 2024, yoummday's event in Munich earlier this year. And there was quite a robust discussion around the fact that currently AI can't sell and it won't be able to sell for a long time. Now, even the advancements I see in my personal use of AI, I'm starting to think that maybe AI is going to be able to sell a lot quicker than we all think. So with sales being one of the critical functions that call centers perform for their clients, Lian, do you think that we're going to see more AI selling? And do you think it can sell now?
I think AI can sell, which is can be a little bit of a controversial statement. I think it depends on what, and it depends entirely on the product. So would I expect AI to be able to behave in the same way as an agent who is fully trained on picking up on emotional cues, for example, and picking up on, for example, you're a retailer, I'm through to an agent, you're buying a load of baby clothes. I can start a conversation with you about who those baby clothes are for, why you're buying those baby clothes. And I can talk about a new range that might have come in, or have you thought about, the cross-selling and upselling opportunities that can be picked up by emotional cues. But actually, there are situations where I think AI can work really well. I've seen it work really, really well for a DIY store, both in the US and in the UK now, with, again, another DIY store where it is really, really good at going, actually, you want to buy barbecue. That was a great example that I saw. You want to buy barbecue. I'm looking for barbecue. Actually, it can help triage those things to be able to say, well, are you looking for ring burners on the barbecue? Are you looking for a gas barbecue? Do you need it to be electric? How many people do you normally feed? Have you thought about? So it can actually do that, as long as, again, coming back to, as long as it's got the information to be able to say, what does that triage? And it's not selling per se, but it's triaging, it's assisted sales, as opposed to actually saying, this is the opening conversation, would you like to buy a watch? It's a very different scenario, but it can I have seen it be very effective in those environments, but not so much with emotional cues. I think there are still things that human beings, regardless of channel, because the channel can still be it could be a chat channel that could be using, just a web chat, could have started off with an AI, for example, and the conversation's been moved to a human at the appropriate time. And then things can move on from there, and then you get great upsells. So I guess I'm still saying, yes, it can, but actually it's better if you've got the human in the loop.
I would just add to that my bank and the supermarket I use most regularly, both of them endlessly push offers and ideas and stuff to me, but it feels very much like spam most of the time. None of it seems to be targeted specifically at me. And if they applied a bit more care and attention, actually using some AI powered analysis on, and these are companies that have got my banking background and history. They've got everything that I've ever shopped for in that supermarket. They know my entire shopping history. So if they actually applied some intelligence and said, well, here's someone who always stocks up on beer before a big football match or something like that, just make some connections, and then you can make offers that are actually going to be applicable and timely, and that is effectively automated selling, because if I get a message with a special offer that's only valid for the next 2 hours, that may well get me out to the shops.
And that brings us back to the data question then, Mark, doesn't it? Companies need to have all the right data being funneled in, and then maybe using AI to connect all the dots for that personalization.
You actually feel as a shopper, you actually feel like this is something that's been sent specifically to you. It avoids the spam point that you just made, Mark, and it actually adds value to the conversation I'm having with you. it adds value to our relationship. And that is really, really quite important when we talk about loyalty and when we talk about, things like that. So the AI has to be able to understand my history, has to know an element about me to be able to personalize it. So I think you're absolutely spot on.
Let's move on now to another theme in the report, a shift to output-based pricing. The Everest Group sees a drop in input-based pricing by about 30% over the past 2 years, with more of a shift to output-based pricing, which has been a feature of yoummday's products since its inception in 2016. Lian, are you seeing anything similar in the marketplace in terms of how companies actually want to buy and pay for outsourcing services?
I think there is a lot of confusion actually about output-based pricing, because I can very much see the market moving towards it. It has to. It absolutely has to. There's no doubt about it. I think the challenge is defining that really clearly between the parties as to what good looks like and what is a successful outcome. So is it contact reduction? Well, maybe not. Maybe it isn't contact reduction. Maybe it's first contact resolution, but how do you measure that effectively? How do we make sure we're doing it? So I think for me, outcome-based pricing is going to be all about value. So you're not talking about an agent per se, or what we're paying an agent. You're talking about the value of the relationship. And I think that's going to become even more important when, as Mark talked about earlier, if we get higher volumes of calls, but a higher percentage of them are simple queries, for want of a better word, and they're being handled by AI, actually the skill sets that we're going to be asking for from our agents are going to fundamentally change. We're going to be looking for empathy. We're going to be looking for much more complex skill sets that we will need to pay more money for, and quite rightly. So as you balance those off, I think we're going to see an evolution in outcome-based pricing and what good looks like and what are good outcomes in those value relationships.
A yoummday CX report for 2025 talks about this fact that more and more BPOs are moving to output-based pricing because the buyers, the CX leaders, they're just demanding more cost efficiency. They don't have those weekly MBRs, monthly MBRs, QBRs for no reason. And output-based pricing, I guess, it's a model that works and it really drives that ROI. But at the same time, there has to be some quid pro quo from the buyers to make it viable. And with work from home setups, that's becoming much easier to manage. Are we thinking then that BPOs are going to have to offer output-based pricing moving into 2025 and beyond to stay competitive and even win business? Surely, Mark.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is that for the last 3 or 4 years, the focus of this has been gig CX. So the operators that are very specifically offering a gig-based model have said, one of our advantages is output. You only pay each time a customer is helped, and it's nice and logical. But I think that we're starting to see a change now. I think if you look at Forrester Research and their predictions for 2025, one of the headlines there is every BPO has to move to output-based pricing because we can no longer sell FTEs when a significant volume may well now be automated. So it's very interesting that you're now seeing major industry analysts just saying, look, this is no longer a gig CX thing. This is how BPO needs to operate.
Let's move on then to another theme covered in yoummday's CX report for 2025, and that's the human touch. So, Lian, with so much focus on AI and automation in customer journeys, do you think businesses are really stepping back enough to ask the right questions behind their automation decisions? And how can BPOs really guide their clients to make sure they're using AI and automation in a way that genuinely enhances the customer experience, keeping the right people in the right places on those journeys, rather than just jumping on the AI hype and following the trends?
There is a challenge on the buy side to helping people who buy BPO services to understand where the benefits of the human in the loop remains vitally important, because I think there is I think there are lots of businesses inside BPO and outside of BPO who aren't asking the why question enough. So they're not asking, why are we automating it, and why is AI going to solve this problem? And I think it's a really interesting question when we ask it around the challenges we're trying to solve for consumers and for customers, because we have to take into account things like digital poverty, we have to take into account digital access, we have to take into account changes in demographics. So what level of automation are different generations comfortable with? And that doesn't mean that we don't use AI to solve the problem. It just means that actually, whereas you can use AI to self-serve a problem where it's appropriate, where someone's capable, where someone has access to the technology and the desire to do it. But that same technology you can flip, and you can use that to give the agent the information so that the agent can then take those conversations faster, stronger, more effectively with the customer whose issue they're trying to solve. So it's AI doesn't always have to be self-serve, and AI doesn't always have to push the self-serve button. AI is about making everybody more effective, whether it's the customer that wants to self-serve, or whether it's allowing the agent to use all of their human skills that are being brought to bear because they have a customer with them who does not, for whatever reason, want to talk to an AI, who doesn't. They might be desperate, they might be upset. It could be a banking call where somebody's really worried about paying their mortgage. We have to consider some of these other use cases where at the moment AI is nowhere near the empathetic entity that we'd like it to be. So the short answer to a very long-winded comment is I think it's horses for courses, and we have to be careful. And actually, we've got a responsibility of BPOs to talk to our customers and actually make sure they're asking the why question about why they want AI in those particular customer journeys in the first place, and just make sure we put the right tech in the right journey with the right, and get people to the right agents when they really need them.
I think that point about the journey is really essential, because a lot of the time here we are talking about post-purchase service interactions. You know, where's my pizza? I bought a TV, I can't get it to connect to the internet. So these kind of, you know, very transactional sort of specific questions. And, you know, in theory, you could really automate most of that. You know, you could look at 3/4 of that vanishing overnight almost, you know, once you have a decent language model trained up and able to handle that stuff. But this is not the totality of the relationship between a brand and the customer, you know, and I think that's important to remember, that the customer experience is much more than the customer service process. So it's about the entire relationship that you have a long time before you become a customer. You may interact with and touch that brand, asking questions, finding out information about it. You know, think of a car. A car is a good example, because, you know, you will interact with Land Rover many times if you're sort of interested in possibly buying a Land Rover. And eventually you will make a purchase, and then you might have a problem afterwards. But in addition to that sort of transactional problem interaction, you will probably also have just relationship sort of interactions, sharing a picture of your car and tagging the company in it, that kind of thing. So you know, there is a lot more to this than just those service calls only.
It really feels like brands have already mastered using AI for quick transactional interactions, and I think they're just going to get better at that as they pull more data into their models. But when it comes to these bigger emotional purchases, customers are still expecting a lot more. So it's not about just solving a problem. I think there's more to it when it comes to anticipating needs, making connections, maybe showing thoughtfulness that really builds this trust and loyalty over time. So, Lian, how do you see companies weaving this emotional intelligence into their CX strategies to strengthen the customer relationships even more?
I think it's hugely important that people Mark hit the nail on the head there earlier on, actually, and it's that fundamental difference between customer service and customer experience, and it's customer experience that drives the relationship. You know, if something goes wrong in a relationship, you know, and I've bought something, and let's just say you buy a kitchen. If it's a big purchase, right? So you buy a kitchen, it's a big emotional purchase. You're emotionally connected to a lot of to this kind of purchase. You're emotionally connected if you're spending a lot of money on a car. These are big emotional decisions that require that, once you're in, you're all in, right? So once somebody's come and ripped your old kitchen out and you're in the process of ordering your new one, and you've got everything, tile fitters and all these kind of things are arriving, actually the importance of the emotional connection between the brand and the consumer is not transactional at that point. It's very much, you're all in, and you expect the people you've worked for to come along with you for the ride, right? Because you're emotionally all in. It's a bit different if you bought, I don't know, something from a generic kind of online retailer because you just need a pair of slippers, right? They arrive or they don't arrive. It's quite binary. But some of these emotional, and you want to build those relationships. So you're talking as well about customer lifetime value. And at the moment, we don't talk about AI in terms of and generative models in terms of customer lifetime value. We talk about them in terms of solving an immediate problem. So there is a wraparound here of emotional intelligence and connection that involves connecting the dots in a much more interesting, personalized way than just, I've solved the problem, your tiles haven't arrived, so there you go, I've told you they're going to arrive tomorrow. That's not the connection. The connection is more than that. And I think it's important to keep that in the round, which is where I think the human beings are still so important.
I really like what you've said here. It's about turning something transactional into more of an opportunity for a meaningful human connection. I think that's where brands can really start to stand out moving into 2025. With regular purchases I make, if I get a well-timed message or email, I definitely spend more with them. I know what I'm like. I'm easily convinced. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on moving beyond the usual AI for the easy stuff, humans for the complex stuff mindset? How can brands use all the tools at their disposal to make these processes more thoughtful and impactful?
Yeah. I mean, I can give you an example from the e-commerce environment where I talked to a company that was using human intervention at the checkout stage, and you would think that this is a highly automated process. You're selecting stuff on an app or on a website, you put it all in your basket, and then you pay for it. But all of these companies have huge numbers of people who never complete the checkout process. They stick stuff in the basket, the shopping cart, and then they never complete the purchase. And so they figured out that if someone is hovering on the payment screen and kind of thinking about it, then they could pop up, like just a little pop-up saying, hey, can I help? Is there a problem? And quite often there is a very specific problem. It'll be something like, the shipping cost is higher than they expected, or the time to deliver is a bit longer than they expected. So, but normally you don't have any way of interacting with the company and talking about what is your very specific problem. And if you give the agents the kind of scope and the leeway to be able to deal with those problems, you can really turn around a lot of that cart abandonment. And it's just by having that kind of human to human connection and finding out from somebody, well, I'm buying $150 worth of stuff. $10 is too much for the shipping cost. But if the agent has got the right to say, you know what, let's just cancel the shipping cost, or I'll give it to you for $5 instead. So just giving them the ability to do stuff like that can get a sale over the line. So you can see even in a sort of very automated environment, inserting a human in the loop in the right place can really affect directly affect your revenue.
Well, there's our first business idea for 2025. We can put real people on checkout pages for companies all over the world.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a way forward.
Let's move on to the final theme in yoummday's CX report for 2025. It highlights the fall of the BPO industry, citing a major shift in call center dynamics and recruitment challenges. On page 19, it notes a 60 to 90% drop in stock performance for some of the biggest players. Mark, what's your take on numbers like these and what they say about the state of the industry?
I mean, I think that the analysts that talk about the value of these companies have traditionally, they've focused a lot on headcount, and what we're probably about to see is a reduction in headcount in many of these companies. But it's very much like what we saw in the IT industry. If you go back 20 years or so ago, every big technology company would boast about how many engineers they've got. We have 500,000 engineers, and you could almost work out the revenue of the business pretty much based on how many engineers they were sending out on day rates. And so we've kind of seen something similar, because most of the time the BPOs are using FTE rates, rates for each person working in the contact center. So we've kind of attached their revenue to having those big headcounts. And clearly we're going to see headcounts dropping. That doesn't necessarily mean that the BPOs are finished. It's not necessarily a train wreck. It may be for some of them if they can't adjust to this environment, because effectively what they need to start selling is complete CX solutions that involve both technology and people, and marrying them together. If they continue to remain very focused on the contact center at the core of their service, then I think, they will absolutely struggle. But it's a bit like the BPOs need to evolve into systems integrators, being able to pull together the best technology for whatever solution their client needs. And it's all theirs to play for, really, because a lot of the technology is out there and available, and you can purchase it and build solutions. So I think the smart ones will right now have teams of people that are experimenting with how are we going to deliver CX services in the future, because it's not going to be entirely just based on the contact center.
More and more companies then are building their own CX stack, if you will, blending tech and human touch. Do you see this bespoke approach as the direction the sector's heading for in 2025?
Yeah, I do agree. It is a little bit of an evolve or an evolve or give up type scenario, give it up type scenario, because the technology. The interesting thing is I see a lot of examples where clients have some technology, but not everything. And I think the days where a BPO, when I first started in BPO, I'm not even going to say how long ago that was, but when I first started in BPO, you were either, you were in a Avaya house, or you were, and that was your technology. That was what you used. And then as technologies evolved, there are still businesses out there who are going, well, we use AWS, we won't use anything else. I think that's a real challenge, because if I look at a client base, well, what if they're bringing certain things that they're already bringing to the table? And the technology that's coming to the table has to have integration capability, because there's no use saying, well, yeah, I'm bringing my technology stack to the table. I'm bringing my amazing piece of technology to the table. And that's the chatbot that comes with it. Well, actually, I want to be able to see 3 or 4 different chatbots and pick the one that's most appropriate for my business. That's the requirement, is to be able to be flexible in building the solutions for clients. And they're solutions overall now. They're not just bums on seats anymore. I think those days are long gone, and I can't see, outside of certain public sector procurement, I can't see that coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the bottom line, and having that flexibility to be able to choose the different types of bot or different types of CRM. I think that's what we're talking about now, being able to connect together these disparate systems and creating a complete solution. Of course, that also begs the question of the BPOs need to demonstrate real expertise in being able to pull that stuff together, because if all those systems are out there and available for anyone to purchase on the cloud, then you could just do it all in-house anyway.
Or alternatively, you could buy from the technology provider, and they could be the ones who subcontract the human element. And we're starting to see conversations along that happening now, where the conversations are going on directly between a client and Microsoft, as an example, and then they might go to the BPO for the human element. So there is definitely a kind of there is a shift. There's very much a shift going on, and I think people have got to be very clever about how they play, and they're going to have to get across the nose to tail CX, as opposed to just the bum on the seat.
And with more and more tech companies entering the CX space and excelling in really niche areas, call centres and BPOs, they need to step up as tech experts, not just service providers. Okay, final question for both of you. What's your headline message then for companies on the buy side as they navigate these shifts in 2025?
Companies on the buy side, I would guess this question that we've just been talking about on the role of the agent, I think will be interesting going forward, because you need to think, I mean, maybe it's more of a sort of a philosophical question, but it's like, what is the role of the agent? It's always been to answer customer questions and deal with customer problems. And yet, as we see much more of that transactional type work automated, the role of the agent will be a much more highly skilled troubleshooter. They will be the real expert, because by the time you talk to that agent, you've already asked Alexa, you've asked Google, you've asked the AI chatbot. That human that you finally end up talking to might be the third or fourth different channel you've tried to get a answer to your problem. And so I think that's going to be important. And I often sort of explain it to people by saying, if you go into the Apple stores, you're always greeted by the salesperson that can help you find something. But they kind of look up to the people at the Genius Bar as, that's like the gold standard. If you work in Apple and you understand all their products and you know them inside out, then you might possibly be able to get a job on the Genius Bar rather than working in sales. And I think that's where we will have to start seeing the customer service agent role evolving to eventually, instead of the kind of low cost, minimum wage. It needs to be someone with a lot of subject matter expertise, really knowing their subject inside out, and they're going to have to be rewarded for that as well. I think this comes to something that we've talked about in the past, Chris, how the people at yoummday are generally much more mature than you would normally find in a customer service contact center. And I think that sort of points towards the fact that you've got people with life experience, maybe experience in a particular industry, and now they just want to do something more flexible where they can choose their working hours, but they can still apply those skills. So I think that's going to be a big topic, or a big sort of change in the way that we think about this entire industry.
And I would tend to agree, empowering agents to make these decisions without waiting for any sort of middle management, additional layers of authorization is really key to moving things forward. Lian Rowlands, heading into 2025, what's your headline message for CX buyers?
The big focus on partnership as opposed to supplier. Pick somebody who is your partner and not your supplier. The BPOs, and I've been lucky enough to work with some brilliant BPOs, big BPOs and small, and they are truly experts in what they do, particularly some who are very niche and yoummday are incredibly good at what they do. Actually trust your supplier. If I could give any message to a buyer, it would be work with as a partnership and trust your supplier, because they have experience quite often that you don't. So as a retailer, for example, no BPO is going to say they know retail better than a retailer, but they do know customer experience, and they do know what's coming down the track, and they do know the technology that's out there. And there is a level of trust that has to be in those relationships in order to build those solutions that are going to be future proof for the next, because I know we're talking here about the next 12 months specifically, but we've got to start building for 24 months and for 36 months, and we've got to stay awake and be ready for change, because the only thing we know about 36 months time is it won't be what we think it is right now. So those partnerships are just going to become so important.
And that's a really nice thought to finish on. Thank you very much to Lian Rowlands, the founder of Tayma Solutions, a CX consultancy in the UK, and Mark Hillary, CX author and analyst, for joining us today to talk about yoummday's CX report for 2025, Transforming Customer Experience, the AI Advantage Meets the Human Touch. You can pick up a copy of that report at yoummday.com, and we look forward to seeing how the year ahead unfolds.